Sabah al-Khair. In this video I want to talk more about idafa and the different ways that we can specify the definiteness of nouns within them. What we might call the relationship between al-idafa wal-ma'rifa wal-nakira in Arabic. I'm assuming here that you have a good understanding of the basic idafa structure, and what I want to do now is complicate things a little bit. Suppose that we want to talk about a newspaper publishing center. Now, you might reasonably suspect that in order to convey that idea in Arabic, we would need to use kind of an idafa structure and front or reorder the words a little bit. And we could line those nouns up and say, okay, a center, markaz of publishing, isdar, as-suhaf, newspapers. Markaz isdar as-suhaf. Looks good, and the truth is, this is a perfectly good idafa, but what we wanted to say was a newspaper publishing center. And what we have here is the newspaper publishing center. Markaz isdar as-suhaf, alif lam at the end, so the whole thing is functioning as definite. But that's not what we want to do here. There's a big difference potentially of meaning between a newspaper publishing center and the newspaper publishing center. Maybe the definiteness implies that it's the only one, and we don't want to do that. So what we do in a case like this is we use the preposition li between the noun we want to stay indefinite and the rest of the phrase. So if we say instead, markaz li isdar as-suhaf, suddenly the markaz is indefinite on its own, and then the isdar as-suhaf is its own separate idafa. So the markaz technically isn't part of this idafa. A center of or for isdar as-suhaf, production of newspapers. Another example, suppose that we wanted to talk about a solution for the problem of funding or financing. Well, same thing, we could take our nouns, hal, mushkila, حل مشكلة التمويل, but once again, this looks like one connected, definite idafa because of the alif lam. So, once more, our solution, if we want to talk about a solution, we would just add that li to the noun that comes after the noun we want to stay indefinite. So now we are saying a solution instead of the solution to the problem of financing. We can also use li to emphasize the indefiniteness of a noun. If you think about the difference in English between two phrases like her new friend and a new friend of hers, we can use li and structure the order of the words a little bit differently to get those difference in meaning. So if we wanted to say her new friend, as you know, we could say صديقها الجديد. But we want to emphasize a new friend of hers. We want to give that little bit of rhetorical distance. What we can do is we can take that ha and then use li plus that suffix at the end to give a more indefinite flavor. We could instead say صديق جديد لها. Not quite an idafa, but another important function of li where it keeps things indefinite for us. Now, if we're specifying or enumerating a part of a group, we can also use the preposition min. I'm going to make some room here. Oops. which functions a little bit like of in English, but it does interrupt our idafa. Technically, two nouns, two ideas connected in this way by min won't be an idafa. They'll just be sort of one noun and then a subordinate prepositional phrase. So if we wanted to take some examples, we see min used a lot with expressions of quantity, like the word for part in Arabic, juz' min, or quantity, qadar min. They're related but not identical words. So if we wanted to say, I don't know, ignorance is part of the problem, we could say juz' min al-mushkila. Or there's a lot of information in this book, or a great quantity of information in this book. Using qadar, we could say في هذا الكتاب قدر كبير من المعلومات. In this book, there's a lot of information. And in these situations, again, we wouldn't have an idafa technically. We would just have a couple of nouns that were connected by min because they're talking about quantities, about being part of a sort of intellectual set of things. Finally, if we're constructing an idafa or an idafa-ish phrase using a masdar, and the verb that's related to that masdar typically has a certain preposition after it, then we're going to retain that preposition, which will have the same effect of kind of interrupting our idafa, turning it sometimes into something other than an idafa. For example, if we wanted to talk about an expression of respect, well, the masdar for expression is ta'bir. And you might think, okay, expression, respect, expression of respect. I'm just going to go ahead and put ihtiram here. But ta'bir, the masdar, comes from the verb abbara, yu'abbir. And typically after those verbs or after this masdar, we have a specific preposition, which is sort of arbitrary, but it happens to be an. So in a case like this, if we wanted to talk about an expression of respect, we would say ta'bir an al-ihtiram. We're just going to keep that preposition because it's the preposition that's normally used after a verb. Or if we wanted to talk about, to say something like, we will attend their wedding celebration. Well, wedding celebration, celebration of the wedding of them, it seems idafa-ish. It seems as though it might be close to an idafa, but that word for celebration in Arabic, ihtifal, typically has a preposition after it, and that preposition is bi. So we could say سنحضر الاحتفال بزواجهم. And in a case like this, since it is a specific celebration, we're going to put the alif lam there, al-ihtifal, and then use the bi, and then zawaj is definite with huma, but we don't have an idafa here. We're saying something like, we will attend the celebration of the wedding of them. We wouldn't have a way to express it other than that in English, but the bi is pretty much obligatory after ihtifal. If we are celebrating something, if that celebration is specific to something or other, bi is just the preposition we're going to use to convey that idea. So using all of these tools that I've articulated here will really enable you to express more specific shades of meaning. There's always a workaround in language, right? We could always rephrase ourselves and circumnavigate a little bit to get our meaning across. But if we want a very specific shade of meaning, a new friend of hers, not just her new friend, or part of or a quantity of, we can use these specific tools to be very precise in our articulation of what we mean.